Hello, welcome to episode number 10 of the series Ernesto Bozzano 2025. Today we'll be talking about another book by Ernesto Bozzano. The title for today is Primitive Peoples and Paranormal Manifestations. So, welcome you all those who are here with us watching, and those who later on will be able to watch it through YouTube or Facebook. So I welcome you all. Um, I chose this title actually because, as usual, we have our dear friend Faith Waddington. So Faith wasn't able to be with us this year. She has given her contribution during the previous years, and she had initially picked up this title. And through the year, actually, she realized she wouldn't be able to make for today. So I decided to make the presentation of this book. And of course, always thanking our dear friend Faye for all her efforts to try to help us in these projects that we have. And this year is about Ernesto Bozzano, about different spiritists, authors, the previous years. And I'm sure you'll be able to count on her for next year for a new project for 2026. Well, so today I'll be talking about this book. Let me just change the slides. Here we are. So, Primitive Peoples and Paranormal Manifestation. This book by Ernesto Bozzano. This is a copy of the book. I'm not sure if this is the original first edition of the book, but it is also initially published in Italian. Popoli Primitivi e Manifestazioni Supernormali by Ernesto Bozzano, 1941. So we'll be talking about this book. But before we do so, it's a very dense book. It is a book where Ernesto Bozzano brings so many different people from different backgrounds, and their accounts about the phenomena that they relate. So Ernesto Bozzano brought all these to us. So before we start, I just want to invite everyone, if you have the opportunity, we have this book in Italian, of course, we have it in Portuguese. I'm not sure if we have a translation into English or other languages, but with the tools that we have today, artificial intelligence and so on, it's very easy for us to, get an idea of what the book is about, or even to have a quick translation of it. So, as I said before we start, it is very important that we understand what this book is about. These are some comments about the work in general, and I consider this very much suitable for the case of this particular book. The comments made by those who worked with Bozzano. Some comments here were made by his students, and I thought they were very important to bring here before we started bringing to you the book, the contents of the book, because it helps us understand what is the methodology adopted by Ernesto Bozzano in all his research, and specifically in this book. So first comment is, most of Bozzano's work was bibliographical, as he compiled cases and analyzed them. This is a characteristic. He did almost what we would call today in science a literature survey, or even going a bit further, we could draw a parallel to meta-analysis, where you basically develop some understanding, you bring some knowledge based on what has been published. So the second comment made here by none of his students is, he did not carry out experiments or directly gather testimony, but he summarized the accounts of the phenomena present in the literature, which he patiently classified during his entire life as immediately valid natural phenomena, and he inserted them into inductive process based on comparative analysis and convergence of proofs. In other words, he pointed out all the likenesses of a certain class of phenomena and reached specific conclusions. So basically, it summarizes how he organized his books, how he did his research, how he came to this conclusion. So basically, he didn't do, although he had contact with some mediums, but he didn't use these mediums to do his research and to write his books. So what he did was he classified what was published. Of course, he took what he considered to be that he could trust, work that he could trust, accounts that were reliable, so that he based all his research in that. But he himself did very little, if any, research regarding spiritist phenomena. And I think this testimony of one of his students is very interesting because it gives us an idea of what this particular book is about. And finally, an interesting contribution was to draw attention to phenomena that were frequently ignored or that at that time received little attention. Especially in this book that we are going to talk about spiritist or spirit phenomena that takes place in countries, and some of them even unknown to us, within groups that in his time, and I'm going to use his vocabulary. I'm not going to adapt or translate his vocabulary to today's language, because I'm describing the book. I'm not making an analysis of what he presents to us, or basically redoing his analysis from a different perspective. No. What I decided to do, because it's a very dense book, we can have many approaches. I just want to bring to you a flavor of this book. I wouldn't be able to, in the time that we have, I wouldn't be able to take case by case and bring and discuss here with you and present to you, let alone make a different analysis of these cases and perhaps come to a slightly different conclusions. What I decided to do was to bring a flavor of what this book is about, some cases for us to see here, and his conclusions, without evaluating the merit of the conclusions he arrived at, or the comments, even the theories he presented as the possible way to explain some of these phenomena. And he talks about people in America, basically the Americas, Africa and Asia, as primitive peoples. I would call them indigenous people. So he talks about certain cults, certain phenomena common to these people that were seen or given basically no attention within what he called civilized world. So basically, the countries in Europe. So he said that, or this student, the comment was actually about the contribution, calling the attention to a class in numerous phenomena that were regarded as of little importance, or sometimes even regarded as nonsense. So chapter 1, he starts talking about, he did a careful work, and he basically narrowed down all the different spirit phenomena. He narrowed them down into small, very clear classes. And then he analyzed all the material that he had in order to establish a correlation between the same class of phenomena in different parts of the world, within different cultures and different indigenous groups, and see if there was a correlation. And also to find an explanation and come to a conclusion. So in this chapter, he's talking about raps and falls and movements of objects at a distance, telekinesis, we call it, and human levitation. So he basically talks about telekinesis as a phenomena that occurs more frequently among savage peoples, so his words, than among civilized peoples, as they have been constantly favored and developed in the savage environment. He calls the savage environment the more natural environment that people would find in the Americas and also in Africa and Asia. The observation of objects moving without contact is considered one of the main causes for the origin of the fetishistic religion, a religion that attributes to objects a supernatural power. We know that is very common in different religions and cults among savages. So basically, he's bringing to our attention the work of all these people. So he classified them in, for instance, animated objects. So a wooden spoon dressed as a doll and placed on a tomb became animated, jumping and dancing. This was a phenomenon that was described by one of his sources. And also a chair, serpentine and jumping, transported a Mongol lama to the tent of a thief. Another phenomenon that he classified as animated objects. Animated rods. So these would be telekinesis in rods and tents. So in Mangaja, wooden rods violently shook, forced a young man to spin, and rolled to the feet of the culprit. So they found the culprit of something using these wooden rods and its spontaneous movement. So among the yells, a staff dragged the men holding it in the direction of a thief. And also the Zulus used Yumabakula, small dancing rods that fell from no and rose or danced for yes, and pointed out the location of the ailment. So basically, they used these rods and their spontaneous movement to find an ailment. And well, that reminds us of how Spiritism started with the moving, the dancing tables. So in this case here, they were rods, not tables, but the phenomenon seemed to be very much the same. He classified also as phonic phenomena, raps. We know of raps, in many different situations, including mid-19th century, when Allan Kardec decided to delve into these type of phenomena in order to find an explanation for that. And within this class of phonic phenomena, the fakir Kavinder Sami made a bronze vase swing and crawl. The vase resonated with metallic blows that converted into drum roll or clock ticking. Analogous phenomena of raps and percussion were observed within European mediums like Daniel Dangler's Home. So he's drawing a parallel between these phenomenon happening in European or with the European mediums, and also happening in these other parts of the world. And also tent movements happening in the Indians, with the Indians. So the Indian doctor would enter the tent and it would start to swing strongly and emit voices. The witnesses, such as L. Johnson Dubé, stated they tried to stop the tent's movements with all their strength, but in vain. So here again, we see here someone reporting this, someone, I believe, Ernesto Bozzano, trusts what the person was telling his account about what happened in these with this Indian doctor. So, yogi case. So, under unprepared circumstances, a yog levitated a girl up to 4 feet high, approximately 1.2 meters. The girl was lying down with her hands holding a thin bamboo rod, which was the only contact with the ground. The spectators, European and educated, were invited to pass their hands around the floating body. decisively confirming that nothing was supporting her. So he bases himself in these European and educated witnesses, spectators, actually to attribute a degree of reliability to this. And a Zulu sorcerer caused the levitation of an athletic indigenous young man who was unconscious. He used a bundle of long flaming herbs that he rotated around the young man's head. The body rose and fell about 3 feet, approximately 90 centimeters, according to whether he passes the burning with a burning bundle where low or slow or fast. So if the movement was slow or fast, the body would move. So the conclusion he drew from this was the modality, empirical method, used to prove the phenomenon varies, but the result demonstrates the occurrence of levitation comparable to cases in civilized peoples like Daniel Douglas Home and San Giuseppe da Cupertino. This was the case of a monk who could levitate and move objects and so on. So he drew this parallel between what was observed within this indigenous community, or a savage community, primitive community, as he used to call them, and the European mediums. Chapter 2. I'm not limiting, I'm not presenting everything that there is in the chapter, and the way he discusses the author he presents, or those, bringing these accounts to us, they are very much detailed in the book. So that's why I invite you all to read the book if you can. As I said before, this is just a flavor. So chapter number 2, he talks about thought reading, telepathy, and telepathic clairvoyance. Again, these are Bozzano's conclusions, Bozzano's theories, and I'm bringing them to you without evaluating if he was right or if he was wrong or limited in his perception of the phenomena. So supranormal manifestations of an intelligent order, focusing on 3 core phenomena observed predominantly in primitive cultures: thought reading, transmission, short distance, perception of a nearby individual's intense conscious thought, proper telepathy, long distance, the transmission or reception of news, events or sensations over vast distances. Example, apparitions of the dying. And third, telepathic clairvoyance, the ability to perceive distant events or read the subconscious mind of a distant individual without the information being present in the consultant's mind. So there is this differentiation between mind reading when the person is close, and of course as telepathic clairvoyance. So some case study here. Number 1, thought reading, the Labaskia. Location in Abyssinia, is north of Ethiopia, if I'm not mistaken, but somewhere in Africa. The subject was Lebasia, a ritualistic medium who enters a trance state to find culprits in thefts. And the event reported here: during a search for a thief, the Lebasia paused in front of the traveler Tadessa, picking up his rifle barrel. The barrel contains a secret political message hidden inside. So Bozzano's analysis then. The medium was influenced not by the crime, but by Tadessa's intense, insistent thought about the hidden message and his anxiety. This is cited as a classic phenomenon of short-distance thought perception. So Bozzano classifies this as thought perception, something that happens when the sensitive is close to the subject. In this case, is Tadessa. Sorry, I apologize for all these different names. So, case study 2: clairvoyance versus interference. The location was King William's Town in South Africa, and the subject, Jajula, a licensed kahuna doctor, witch doctor. So, two situations. Case 1, clairvoyance. Jajula correctly informed a victim that the employee had ridden £500 in an until instead of being robbed, leading to the money's recovery and the employee's arrest. Then a second situation, the magistrate's test. A magistrate tried to deceive Jajula by having money secretly hidden. Jajula, having money secretly hidden. Jajula immediately exposed the deception, located the hidden money, and identified the man who hid it. So we see another case of finding object or finding someone who is the culprit or, the thief, using this paranormal perception, in this case, clairvoyance. And then he specifies here the case of the interference phenomenon. Experiences show that the consultant's active thoughts, suspicions, anxieties, or specific mental images can be subconsciously read by the medium, causing the predicted outcome to fall. I'm sorry. It's just that, there's a bit missing here at the end. To fail, predicted outcome to fail or be diverted. For instance, the medium describes the consultant's thought rather than the true distant event. So interference is when the medium, in this case, is not describing a fact or what he's saying, but actually he's receiving interference from the subject's thoughts, being something different. It's like you seeing something for yourself, or you having someone telling you about what he or she is saying. So he classifies this as interference from the subject. Telepathy of sensation and emotion. So it's not just the perception, the images that are seen. In the previous case, we could even see that, our state of mind, our spirit can create thought forms, images. And these images that our mind creates can be seen by other people. So he, could basically, in the previous case I'm talking about, could see scenes, see what was going on, or perceiving what the subject, in this case, was creating. But here he's talking about sensations and emotions. So perceiving what someone else is feeling and his emotions. And this case here, the location was in a New Guinea expedition. A resident magistrate, his assistant, Bushmire, and a sergeant all awoke hours before dawn with an inexplicable feeling of nervous superexcitation and a sense of smelling danger. The aftermath. They later learned that an enemy chief had sent 3 columns to attack their recently abandoned camp at that exact moment, hours away. So the analysis of this group was away. They were coming to attack where these people were, where the event took place, and they were hours away. So they learned that through ideas, through visions, no, through sensations and emotions. And the analysis by Bozzano. This is an example of voluntary telepathic transmission that took the form of a sensation emotion, alarm, danger, perceived simultaneously by 3 sensitive individuals. And this is something else. It wasn't perceived just by one of them, but by 3 of them. And so it's in a very interesting case that he brings here to us. Telepathy as such. So he would say that these apparitions of the dying are a true case, a real case of a telepathy, and not a case where you have mixed with interference or a thought reading or something like that. So the context here was among primitive peoples, the belief is widespread that seeing the ghosts of a living person presages their death or imminent death, a conclusion analogous to findings in civilized cultures. So 95% of phantasms appear at the time of death. And the case was within the Maori people. The Sikh companion. The Maori hunters saw the apparition of a Sikh companion who had stayed in the village. They later found he had died the same day of the vision. And then a second case here that we have the Mr. Tregier's uncle. A Maori chief recounted seeing his distant uncle's phantom, who quickly became transparent and vanished. So Mayo later confirmed the uncle's death. So we see these cases of telepathy. We know quite a few cases also with, for instance, Swedenborg and so many cases where we have clear situation of telepathy. But in this case, Bozzano is evaluating if these phenomena that were present here could be classified as telepathic ones. So telepathic clairvoyance case study, the Lobasha boys. So another case. So hypnotized children were used to find distant culprits for crimes like arson and murder in Abyssinia. In one murder case, the boy is in a trance traced the killer's movements after the crime, visiting churches, etc., which the culprit later confessed to, leading to the arrest. So basically, they could find out and see the places, in the case churches, where this culprit went to, and in the end confessed. So contributing to the credits of what these boys had seen. So conclusions here: the existence of these supernatural phenomena, thought reading, telepathy, clairvoyance, is observed and documented in both primitive and civilized cultures. And scientific analysis often concludes that failed tests are due not to the lack of psychic ability, but to the subconscious mental interference of the consultant. So he adds this, that sometimes it is not possible, not because the psychic phenomena is not taking place correctly, but there's also an extra interference, in this case, of the consultant. So before we move to chapter 3, I want to say hello to Marta Encarnação, Elsa Rossi, and Pat Kay. Thanks for being here with us. It's It's very nice to see you all here. So I do apologize for the change in size here for the slides. When we load them into the platform, they change slightly. So we have here clairvoyance in the present, past, and future. So classification and analysis of clairvoyance manifestations, which are divided into thalassesia, sight at a distance, present, telepathic clairvoyance, and precognition, retrocognition. So the author emphasizes the difficulty in classifying cases due to discrepant incidents. So he brings a case here, case number 1. This is the case of Abdallah Isa, a holy man in Danakil, the African soothsayer. Abdallah Isa accurately describes the floor plan of a lieutenant's house in Milan, thalassesia, or psychometry. He later guessed the contents of a sealed letter for the lieutenant, news of his son's illness, now recovered. So the analysis by Bozzano is the first incident could be attributed to reading the lieutenant's subconscious. The second, reading a sealed letter whose contents the lieutenant was unaware of. Is a categorical case of thalassesia. So seen through opaque objects, sight at a distance. So the author also suggests psychometry, psychic connection mediated by the letter, as a possible explanation. So psychometry, basically, the sensitive, the medium perceives, touching the object may perceive its content, for instance, or other objects. So case 2, Danakil holy man again. Another indigenous holy man described as crooked, one-eyed, stuttering, and drunkard, correctly guessed the contents of a sealed letter to the commander, a brother's illness, and his imminent recovery. He also predicted the approach of an airplane with 9 or 10 minutes anticipation, about 50 kilometers away. So the airplane was 50 kilometers away, and he was able to tell them that it was on its way. So the analysis, the author concludes that the best explanation is psychometry or thalassesia, as it is more than presumable the holy man could not read Italian, ruling out fraud. So basically the letter was in Italian and he couldn't read it. So he, was illiterate in Italian. So case 3, Carlotta, the Indian woman in Canada. So we see that, he's bringing cases from different parts of the world, within indigenous people, but from different parts of the world. So Carlotta is a Mushini clairvoyance. So she is in a clairvoyance trance, described a canoe departing from Rupert's house, 120 miles away, at 6 p.m., carrying a great white chief. The visualized scene, canoe, 4 rowers, flag, bishop in a cloak with hair over his eyes, was absolutely exact, confirming the departure occurred at the predicted time. So another case, and the analysis by Bozzano is hesitation between thalassesia and telepathic clairvoyance is noted. The seer's doubt about whether it was the bishop or another chief suggests thalassesia, direct visual perception of the event, rather than telepathic clairvoyance, reading the bishop's subconscious. So he makes here the difference. So based on the hesitation by the clairvoyant, he classifies what type of a phenomenon in his view. So chapter 4, phenomena of infestation. I confess to you that initially I was curious about this infestation, but basically infestation is the way he called poltergeists. So a comparison between infestation, poltergeist manifestations in primitive and civilized peoples. So typical phenomena includes stone throwing, rain of stones, raps, falls, and phantasmagoric crashes, echo of heavy footsteps, and ghost appearances. I have to confess that when I was sort of young, there was a case like that on the streets that I used to live in São Paulo, in Brazil. That was very famous. Almost every day, people were stopped by the house and say that stones were thrown there. No one saw where it was coming. There were other buildings, houses nearby around it, so there wasn't the proper condition for someone to hide and start throwing the stones. And so I believe that most of us have heard or read about these cases. And so what Bozzano did here was to compile similar cases here and evaluate them. So goes in primitive peoples. Among the Zulus, Esemkofu are disturbing wandering spirits that infest the areas where they lived and can cause stone throwing, analogous to European poltergeists. And also here he talk about Ailozi, in contrast, are spirits of those who die normally and receive sacrificial rituals. So saying some spirits are classified here among the Zulus as the ones who didn't have a proper ritual, and the ones who have a natural death and receive what is called a ritual, a passage for their passage. So cemetery apparitions, indigenous people consider ghost apparitions in cemeteries normal, manifesting as shadows, phantasmal forms, or deceased people, or luminous clouds. The author suggests these luminous clouds may be the well-known will-o'-the-wisps. These cases, which sometimes are related as folk figures and phenomena, they have also an explanation, which is regarding the gases that we have due to the decomposition of bodies in the cemetery, and they ignite and so on. But he attributes these luminous clouds, for instance, to these cases more than a supernatural phenomenon as such. So stone throwing cases. He brings some cases here for us. A girl in Java, an indigenous girl adopted by a governor, became the focus of a rain of stones, seemingly falling from the sky. The phenomenon persisted even when the house was surrounded by soldiers, with the stones and fresh mango fruit falling inside the house, passing through the roof. The girl is presumed to be the medium who made the sporadic phenomenon possible. So a case as the one I myself could witness when I was young, a case where objects, they fall from basically nowhere, and different objects, not just stones, because the stones are easy to find, and the spirits, as we're going to see, they can transport these stones from one place to another. Mangoes are more difficult, but perhaps in this case, she was in Java, and I suspect that they have mango trees in Java and probably nearby. A second case, the Grothendieck in Sumatra complex poltergeist. So Mr. Grothendieck's account of small stones falling into his thatched hut in Sumatra features crucial particulars. The stones came from the roof, Hajang, which was not pierced or damaged. The stones fell with remarkable slowness and veered into the air to avoid being caught. The stones were warmer than normal to the touch. So these are particularities of the phenomenon. It was not just the case of, stones falling from the roof, but they were warm and they veered. They avoided being caught. The mystery of apports. So these are cases of disintegration and physical proofs. The mystery of apports, the circumstances of objects, stones, apports, passing through walls or ceilings without damaging them, leads the author to discuss the phenomenon of instantaneous disintegration and reintegration of matter. Medium's explanation, operating mediumistic personalities, explained that the object's passage is an act of will that causes the near instantaneous disintegration and reintegration of the object or a hole in the structure. So physics objection, the objection by physicists as to this type of phenomenon. Eminent physicists like Sir Oliver Lodge and de Braath, they disagree, arguing that the feats of instantaneous matter disintegration requires formidable amount of energy, making it an insuperable objection. This was the opinion of physicists like Sir Oliver Lodge and de Braath, but then Bozzano replied. So the author uses the dynamite analogy, which can detonate with immense energy when hit and burn innocuously with a small flame, to suggest that the latent energy in matter may manifest or not, depending on the operating process. So would be psychic rather than physical. So basically, this is his argument. Of course, he didn't go to prove that was the case. That was only his explanation based on an analogy that he makes. We know that we can burn petrol, for instance, but if you spray it in a closed chamber and you ignite it, it won't burn, it will explode. So the amount of energy is the same, but the way that energy is released is in a different way. So what Bozzano is trying to say is that perhaps, depending on how that amount of matter is manipulated, you can release this formidable amount of energy that is necessary to make it, disintegrate and reintegrate. We can also talk about the cases of antimatter, for instance, particles that appear and disappear through a process of creation I wouldn't say the creation, the formation of the pair and the disappearance of this pair electron-positron, for instance. But, it's just speculation. As far as I know, there's no research in that topic. So the proof of heat, the sensation of heat in the falling stones or brought objects, apports, is seen as a rigorously scientific proof, as this thermal reaction is expected by the physical law of force transformation when the rapid process of disintegration and reintegration occurs. This is what he is saying. I went after further information about this, neither from physics nor from other spiritualist literature, but this is his explanation and even considered to be the proof of what he's saying. Chapter 5 about apport and asport. Apporto, in Italian, and asporti. as Bozzano has placed that. So the definition: a port is the phenomenon where an object is transported from outside into a sealed enclosure. And asport is the opposite movement. The object disappears from inside a sealed enclosure and appears somewhere else on the outside. So it's rare in primitive cultures, he says. The author noted that surprising lack of apport cases among African and North American, I would say indigenous peoples, but according to Bozzano, in those days, called savage peoples, finding them only among the semi-civilized peoples of Asia and Polynesia. Also, the author's justification is that the scarcity may be due to the environmental conditions and primitive mentality, where the idea of asking fetishes for the apport of object was not a pressing need. They prefer to ask for cures, hunting, info, and enemy news. And most accounts from explorers and missionaries are superficial, preventing a scientific classification. So he's saying that these cases of apport and asport couldn't be well evaluated because there weren't many cases, serious cases reported here. So there is one case here, the case of Josephine Ranson, in the Himalayas. A young yogi in a normally lit room materialized 7 items upon request: boiled hot milk by covering the container, dried fruits, and an out-of-season green melon, uncovered. We see why he's mentioned if it was covered or uncovered. So the yogi failed to bring the requested chocolate sweets, which he didn't know, showing the process is limited by the medium's conscious mind. So he's saying when asked to bring something that he didn't know what it was, he couldn't do it. So Bozzano infers that the medium conscious mind takes a part in here. So the practice of covering the container with a cloth or using a box, as the case of hot milk, is viewed as a cautionary measure identical to that in the West, suggesting that obscurity may be indispensable for the rematerialization of some objects brought in fluidic conditions. We know that about the ectoplasm, the fluids are very sensitive to light, and perhaps he's saying this is why it had to be covered or to be inside a container. So, ethical conclusion, and he calls it crucial. The author concludes that apporto is not the work of the medium's subconscious supranormal faculty. The refusal of entity to bring money, claiming it would be theft or a prohibition, demonstrates the presence of a high-graded, ethically observant spiritual entity that inhibits the satisfaction of culpable desires. So basically, he's saying that these objects are transported from somewhere. They are not created there. If they are transported from somewhere, if you take something of value, great value, it means that is theft. And that the entities perhaps not creating. In Spiritism, we know that the entities who are able to manipulate denser fluids to promote this type of a phenomenon, they are entities closer to matter than spiritualized. But entities who are more spiritualized, they overlook the work, and they are the ones to say what can and what cannot be done by these other spirits who manipulate the fluids. And he's saying that perhaps that's why money is not brought in that case. Otherwise, the jewelry, the money, the object of value is lost. For instance, they take it from the bottom of the sea, from somewhere else, and then they will bring to those there where the phenomenon is taking place. But having said that, in most cases they would have to take it from someone, and that would be considered as theft. Chapter 6, Black Magic and Sorceries. We go very quickly through these chapters. So basically, he talks about hypnotic fascination as the central factor in black magic among primitives, used to reduce wild beasts and snakes to impotent and perpetrate all kinds of sorcery. The second indispensable factor is the auto-suggestion of those who blindly believe in the practice. So hypnotic fascination, when it comes to work with animals, he mentioned here that beasts, snakes, transforming them in impotent animals, and also talking about auto-suggestions when dealing with other people. So the author acknowledges that black magic can be an external spiritual origin under special circumstances, but in the vast majority of cases, it stems from the extraordinary potential that hypnotic fascination exerts on exceptionally gifted individuals. So he says that these two situations are possible: a phenomenon involving spirits, or a power that some people have and use for hypnotic fascination. So the author explores hypnotism in primitives, focusing on the annulment of pain, analgesia or anesthesia, the production of collective hallucinations, shared visions, and the production of lesions or wounds without bleeding, stigmata. So, in the case of analgesia or analgesia, hypnotism can produce total anesthesia or analgesia in both humans and animals. Examples include surgeries performed under hypnosis without pain, and hypnotized animals such as frogs becoming insensitive to fire. So it's interesting that we see here, and I know some people use hypnosis. Some dentists, they use hypnosis with those people who they are terribly afraid of the injection to anesthetize, their nerves before doing any procedure in their mouth. So I know some, who offer these possibilities. The elephant foot sorcery, a common tribal sorcery in the belief that a sorcerer can cause sudden death or monstrous swelling elephant's foot in an enemy. Sorcery explanation. The phenomenon is explained by autosuggestion combined with fear, acting on the individual's nervous system to cause death or illness, which is analogous to medical cases of induced neuropathy by autosuggestion in civilized environments. So the author cites the account of Dr. Junker about Abanda children in Central Africa who appeared to be stabbed in the abdomen with a dagger and healed instantly. So basically it shows that it was, a case that was not real as such. So I have these summary here. The main purpose, the primitive reason, the primary reason primitives could consult sorcerers, ranging from love portions to the elimination of enemies. So this is the reason, the main purpose for consulting with the sorcerers. That's what he concluded. Action mechanism, how does it take place? So black magic works through the psychic force released by the sorcerer's will concentration to dominate the victim's subconscious personality. A key factor in this is hypnotic fascination or suggestion at a distance is indispensable for black magic to succeed. And defense. The best defense is an opposing, neutralizing suggestion. Success often relies on the client's blind faith, auto-suggestion. So saying that not everyone will be affected by that, but those who can easily be auto-suggested. Lycanthropy. The belief that African sorcerers, analogous to European werewolf legends, have the power to temporarily transform into animals, wolves, hyenas, jackals, to gather information, practice evil, or satisfy base instincts. So the phenomenon can be a modality of black magic. If the sorcerer transforms himself, so it is considered a type of black magic, or a form of spiritual lycanthropy, if it is the spirit of a deceased person returning to earth in animal form. So the author classifies it into three categories. Hallucinatory lycanthropy. The sorcerer does not transform but induces a hallucination in himself and others. So it is believed that it is happening, but it is a hallucination. Anemic lycanthropy. The sorcerer projects his ethereal double, the astral body, the perispirit, for us spiritists, with the appearance of an animal. So basically, it's transforming the shape of perispirit, your astral body, your ethereal double, to assume the form of an animal. And spiritual lycanthropy, discarnate spirit manifests in animal form. So it is an spirit manifestation or incorporation, as he called it. So hypnosis, he talks about hypnosis, considered to be the most plausible one. This is a hypothesis 1. And hypothesis 2, the sorcerer in a state of trance, hypnotic sleep, projects his ethereal body. So detaches his astral body, ethereal body, or double or perispirit, which will then have a form, and perhaps even having a case attached to that, a case of materialization. So the striking case of Dr. AECB. The sorcerer induced a trance, and 2 dancers in his circle transformed into authentic jackals that ran into the forest. This is what this doctor is reporting. The next day, the narrator treated a young girl with deep jackal scratches, an exceptional case. The author states he does not know if it was a hallucinatory, a phantasmagoria, or real. He concludes that taking a definite side on the matter is premature and simply exposes the current states of research. So these are manifestations of phenomena that within the Spiritism we have explanation, but these are the conclusions, the explanations by Bozzano. Chapter 9, I'll go very quickly through that because, as I said before, I try to summarize as much as possible. It is a very dense chapter. So chapter 9, the fire walk, which is common among semi-civilized, civilized Asian peoples in India, Japan, Fiji, and other countries, existent among savage African tribes. The phenomenon demonstrates the existence of supranormal faculties in the human subconscious, forming the basis of ancient magic. So there is the case, a Japanese case, where a Japanese sensitive transmitted his power to 2 European youths by contact. They crossed the blazing space 3 times without foot damage. The Tahiti case, a man crossed the firewalk. His feet and shoe soles were unaffected, but his face suffered the effects of the heat, showing skin cracker, showing that the feet and the shoe soles that were close to the fire suffered nothing, but his face that was higher up was affected because he wasn't protected by whatever was protecting at their feet and shoe soles. And the Burma case, priests of the god Agnes had to pass the test. An Englishman filmed the ceremony. One of the catchments failed the test and was pulled out of the furnace dead, showing that those who succeeded survived, and this one, he died, and according to Bozzano, that was filmed. Chapter 10, Witch Doctors and Healing Systems. So we have much to learn from savage peoples in the cure of diseases, as they possess effective remedies unknown to European medicine. In my personal perception, Munir, what I could conclude from that, and this is the first opinion I'm going to add on Bozzano's book, is that, these people, they are more exposed to nature and natural phenomena than we who live in cities, where we live in a sort of artificial environment that we created for ourselves. So we are less exposed to natural phenomena. And that's why perhaps we ignore some of these healing processes that these indigenous people already have and use for so long. So remedy used by Zulus, Bozutos, and Grikas are miraculous. Snake bite countervenom, for instance. So many effective modern medicines, coca, sarsaparilla, are owned to witch doctors of the Americas. So basically civilized people, as he calls them, learned from these indigenous people how to use them. So there is the R.L. Stevenson case. He was cured from a dangerous cold by a witch doctor. The Rhodesia case, Reverend E.W. Smith's snake bite pain and inflammation were cured after witch doctor repeatedly blew on the affected eye. We know this type of healing. It is known amongst the spiritists. And the Zulu eye cure. These Zulu eye cure, a nearly blind man was cured instantly after a ritual involved a hypnotized white chicken. So he had his sight recovered. So conclusion, primitive medicine deserves more respect. The challenge for science is to separate the truth from the false in their practices. Yes, a careful study to learn what is really scientific and true from what is not. This is his advice. So chapter 11, astral body, double bilocation. These are also phenomena known that amongst spiritists. The belief in an astral body or fluidic body, the double, we call perispirit, capable of separation from the physical body, is universal across all peoples and times. So what he's saying is really interesting. All peoples, all times, they knew there was an extra body, an astral body, the double, you name it, And highly developed in ancient Egypt, the Ka in the Book of the Dead, and in Tibet, in the Bardo. It classified as doubling or projection of the double, fantôme de vivant, the most well-founded form of bilocation. And primitives achieved the projection through rituals, dancing, smoke, narcotics, that empirically facilitate the necessary conditions. We know that this is a way, it's not the only way. We have different ways of doing it, but he's saying that in their case, they use this means to help them in getting out of the body. Bengal monk case, sunny Asian monk in deep trance described the distant places visited and the health of absent people with absolute accuracy. And the Ujima sorcerer case, the sorcerer Ujima entered a trance in the presence of a python to obtain precise information from a distant person via his double's journey. So astral traveling, as some people say, by location. So final conclusion, primitive peoples empirically solved numerous metapsychic problems of great biological, psychological, and philosophical importance about which current civilized peoples know nothing or very little. Chapter 12, mediumistic sessions with telekinesis, direct voices, scenography, materialization, and spirit identification. So, mediumistic experiences, all these he mentioned in the book, chapter title, they occur identically among primitive and savage people. So, it's common to, all parts of the globe. So, cases cited in previous chapters, like the black sensitive Salima invoking the spirit of her deceased husband, Mbona, and the Native Americans invoking the chief great turtle, confirm that witch doctors and sensitives decisively assume the functions of mediums. So they are mediums. So many episodes are complex, containing multiple characteristics, physical and intelligent, making rigid categorization difficult. The author chose to classify them by the most relevant characteristics, saying that these phenomena, they don't have one specific type very clearly identifiable there. So it's difficult to classify if this is a case of this or that. Or so what Bozzano did was basically to use the most relevant characteristic, but it doesn't mean that other things are not occurring there. Okay, so the direct voice, Zulu, consequence of direct voice, the direct voice phenomenon become primary, a means of communication with the discarnate among savages, as the lack of a written language prevented the development of psychography, as we know it, the writing or the automatic writing, which are situations here that you need a language, right? And rarer phenomena or other manifestations like shenoglossy, the mediums speaking in a known language, and materialization of body parts, for instance, the throat, and a voice coming out of these materialized throat. In this case here, the materialization of a hand and arm of Mabona's spirit, capable of lighting matches and putting out lights, also verified among primitives. So he's talking about these cases. So I only mention here full materialization, spirit identification. So frequency and conclusion in these cases, the frequency of direct voice phenomena among savages is explained by the inverse reason for its rarity among the civilized. Savages focused on what was easiest for them, direct voice, while the civilized developed psychography as it was simpler. So showing that they went different ways because the convenience of it. Reaffirmation, all the facts cited in the book serve to reiterate the thesis that there is no difference in the fundamental nature of metapsychic phenomena between civilized and primitive men. This is very interesting. So conclusions, we've run out of time. I'm sorry. As I said before, the long, dense chapter. I only reads the main parts of these conclusions. So Bozzano concludes that the demonstration and recognition that mediumistic and metapsychic phenomena are not a novelty, right, arising from modern spiritualism, so that can be found in primitive people. They also demonstrated that primitive and savage races realize all gradations of supernormal manifestations. So they have all different types of manifestation. They give importance to some in some areas, others in other areas, but they have all types of manifestations, psychic manifestations in within all these groupings of people. The manifestations of savages agree with those of civilized people. That's another conclusion by Bozzano. The existence of a supranormal phenomenology is universal in universal manifestations should be considered scientifically demonstrated and definitively accepted by science. So that's what he's saying, because in his view there is enough evidence. The fact of supranormal manifestation resolves great philosophical and psychological questions. So regarding all these beliefs. Also, the supranormal manifestations demonstrate the opposite. The belief in the soul did not originate from insufficient observations, but rather from manifestations of a supranormal order, absolute adequate to demonstrate the legitimacy of the belief. And also the author criticizes the puerile, ridiculous, and venomous objections of journalists, saying that they are arrogant in their unconscious ignorance and irreducible misogynism. So basically he's saying that, they think they know all about it and they are not careful in describing it. So my final slide. So the author concludes that the definitive demonstration about the destiny of the being must impose itself through a slow evolution and never by revolution. So it should come as we are ready to accept that, and not through a revolution, which is something that happens all of a sudden, very intense. He says that slowly we'll get there. And the adversaries who delay the process, the conservatives, as he called them, ultimately complete an absolutely providential moderating and delaying work, being just as indispensable as the precursors. So what he's saying is that they have their role in this process, so we shouldn't be too concerned with those delaying the process, because basically what they are helping us to do is to question ourselves regarding their arguments, so that we will find the answers for that. And finally, I want to end with this sentence, which I find, very much in the essence of this book. Truth founded on facts should never fear enemies, as it has time, the invincible ally, on its side. It's true. It's really true, So I'm sorry I've gone over our time, but I didn't want to cut it short, and sorry for rushing towards the end. But what I want to do is actually to ask you to read this beautiful book. It's packed with information, and it's really valuable. So our announcements, I'll quickly go through them. Next month, on the 2nd of November, which is a Sunday, same time, 7 p.m. UK time, we'll have here with us our dear friend Dan Assisi, and he'll be talking about the book, The Puzzles of Psychometry and the Phenomena of Synesthesia, something that we mentioned here, Hugo, in detail, based on this book by Bozzano. I'm sorry. Our friend Dan Assisi will also be with us this coming Wednesday, the 8th of October. He'll be in the Spiritual Light, talking the subject of the program on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, is the 5 books of the Spiritist Codification, a map for spiritual growth. That will be hosted by Charles Kemp, Elsa Hossi, and Stefan Bertoso, as usual. But we also have this great contribution from our dear friend Dan Assisi. Also, I want to invite you all, those who are interested in the Medium's book by Allan Kardec. We hold our online study every Saturday, 10:30 a.m. UK time. So you're more than welcome to join us. We have just started the book again, so it's a good opportunity for you to join us and study this beautiful book by Allan Kardec. We'll find is the spiritist explanation for all these classes of phenomena that we just described from Bozzano's book. So invite you all to go to the website of the Spiritist magazine. And also want to thank the Spiritist Society of Ireland, the British Union of Spiritist Society, and also the Mouvement Spirit Francophone. They are always with us in different ways and giving us the support, especially for this series that we have here, and also our studies. We always have the support of the British Union of Spiritist Society, especially. And finally, we want to thank Kardec Radio for all the support and for putting available to us whatever they have in order to help us with this enterprise, which is the series. This is not the first year. We've had different authors in the previous years, and certainly next year we have a different one, and we always can count on Kardec Radio, so we are very grateful to them. That's all we had for today. I thank you all very much for being here with us, being patient with me. Sometimes I had to speed it up, a lot of information, and the StreamYard disconfigured my slides. I have to see how to do it, so next time we won't have it. And I do apologize for that, and hope to see you all next week. But before we go, I just want to thank our dear friends for their presence here. So once again, saying hello and thanking Martin Carnação, Elsa Rossi, and Pat Kay. Thank you very much for your presence. So hope to see you all on the 2nd of November with Dana Sisi here with us for another episode of Ernesto Bozzano's 2025. For now, bye-bye.